Commander Lee adjusted his tie as the transport pod descended through Nexus 7's atmosphere. The colony's 3 moons glinted against the purplish sky, their light reflecting off the sprawling white buildings below. This was his first field assignment as federal prosecutor, and he was determined to succeed. His mission was straightforward but delicate: investigate claims of corruption within the colony's judicial system and gather evidence of illegal trade with the Arcturus Confederation. Earth Command had received troubling reports of biased rulings against Earthborn citizens, particularly those with darker skin tones like his own. "Identification, please," requested the port officer as Lee stepped onto the landing platform. The man barely glanced at Lee's credentials before waving him through. Perfect, his cover as a minor trade representative remained intact. Lee walked confidently through the colony's central district. Unlike the chaotic energy of Earth cities, Nexus 7 had an unsettling orderliness. Citizens moved with purpose, their expressions blank, eyes averted from strangers. The buildings rose in perfect geometric harmony, all white stone and gleaming metal. He found a quiet cafe with a good view of the courthouse and ordered a local beverage. The bitter liquid helped him stay alert as he observed officials coming and going. His wrist device secretly recorded their faces for later identification. "Excuse me, sir," a stern voice interrupted his thoughts. Lee looked up to see 2 colonial officers standing over his table. "We need to verify your authorization to be in this sector." Lee smiled politely. "Of course." He offered his identification chip. "I'm here on trade business. Just taking a short break." The taller officer scanned his chip and frowned. "Your clearance doesn't permit recording devices in this zone. Colony Ordinance 247B specifically prohibits data collection near government facilities." Lee's heart quickened, but his expression remained neutral. "I wasn't aware. I was simply checking messages from my office." "Your device has been actively scanning for over 20 minutes, the officer stated. "Please come with us for processing." Lee considered his options. He could reveal his true identity, but that would compromise the entire investigation. Better to play along for now and see where this led. "There must be some misunderstanding," Lee said as he stood. "But I'm happy to clear this up." The officers escorted him through side streets to a smaller building connected to the courthouse. Inside, Lee's possessions were placed in a sealed container, and his communication devices disabled. "Name?" asked a board clerk at the processing desk. "Daniel Lee, Earth Trade Commission," he answered calmly. The clerk's eyes narrowed slightly at the mention of Earth. "Wait here." Lee sat on a hard bench in the holding area. 2 other detainees, both dark-skinned like himself, sat silently across from him. Neither would meet his gaze. "First time in trouble with Judge Park," whispered one eventually. Lee nodded. "She doesn't like Earth people," the man continued. "Especially ones who look like us. My advice? Just pay whatever fine she demands and get off this rock." Before Lee could respond, an officer called his name. "Judge Park will see you now." The courtroom was small but imposing. High ceilings created perfect acoustics, making even whispers audible. Judge Park sat on an elevated platform, her white hair pulled into a severe bun, her pale face expressionless as she reviewed his file. "Mr. Lee," she said without looking up. "Unauthorized data collection is a serious offense on Nexus 7. We value our privacy." "Your Honor, I wasn't aware of the regulation. I was simply..." "Ignorance is not a defense," she interrupted. "Earth sends you people here with no respect for our customs or laws." Lee noted her choice of words. "You people." Exactly the kind of bias he was investigating. "The standard fine is 50,000 credits, Judge Park announced. Or 3 months in colonial rehabilitation." The amount was absurdly high for such a minor offense, nearly 6 months' salary for the average Earth worker. This, too, was part of the pattern: excessive penalties designed to intimidate Earth citizens. "I'll pay the fine," Lee stated calmly. "Wise choice," Judge Park said with the faintest smile. "Process his payment," she instructed her clerk. "And ensure Mr. Lee understands the boundaries of his welcome on Nexus 7. As Lee was escorted out, he made one final request: "I'd like formal documentation of these proceedings, please. For my employer's records." The clerk looked surprised but handed him a data tablet to sign. Little did they know, this documentation would soon become Exhibit A in a much larger case, one that would shake Nexus 7's corrupt foundation to its core. The Colonial Guards led Lee into Courtroom 3, a stark space dominated by white marble and harsh lighting. Unlike Earth's democratic circular courts, this room emphasized hierarchy. Judge Park sat elevated 2 meters above everyone else, her bench crafted from expensive imported wood that contrasted sharply with the cold stone surrounding it. Lee took his position at the defendant's platform, standing tall despite feeling all eyes in the room assessing him. The courtroom wasn't full, but those present, mostly colonial administrators and a few curious citizens, watched with detached interest. Lee noticed none of them looked like him. Every face was pale, their expressions ranging from indifference to mild contempt. Case 47329, Colonial Authority vs. Daniel Lee, Earth Trade Commission, announced the clerk, a thin man with perfectly combed hair. Violation of Colonial Ordinance 247B. Judge Park looked down at Lee, her eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Lee, you are charged with unauthorized data collection in a restricted zone. How do you plead?" "I understand the charge, Your Honor, but there was no intent to." "A simple guilty or not guilty will suffice," Judge Park interrupted, her voice echoing in the perfect acoustics. Lee paused, considering his strategy. "Not guilty due to lack of proper notification about restricted zones." Murmurs rippled through the small audience. The corner of Judge Park's mouth twitched downward. "Evidence presentation," she commanded. A screen activated beside her bench. It displayed footage from security cameras showing Lee sitting at the cafe, his wrist device occasionally glowing as it scanned the courthouse across the street. The defendant was recorded using a Class B scanning device within 20 meters of a government facility, stated the prosecutor, a young man who seemed bored by the proceedings. His device captured facial data of 17 colonial officials without consent. "Mr. Lee, do you deny operating this device?" Judge Park asked. "I do not deny using my standard Earth communication device, Your Honor. However, I was not aware this area was restricted. I saw no posted notices, and my entry documentation contained no such warnings." Judge Park's eyebrows rose slightly. "Are you suggesting our colony is at fault for your ignorance?" "No, Your Honor. I'm simply stating that I couldn't comply with a regulation I was unaware of." Judge Park tapped her screen, bringing up a new document. "Your entry visa, which you signed, includes Section 12, Paragraph 7, stating that all Earth visitors must familiarize themselves with colonial ordinances." "Ignorance is not a defense." Lee noticed she had skipped directly to this point without allowing him to fully present his case, another procedural violation he carefully memorized for later. "Your Honor, if I may." "You may not," she said firmly. "The evidence is clear. Colonial ordinances exist to protect our citizens and maintain order. Your actions, whether intentional or not, violated our laws." Lee observed how Judge Park spoke to the audience more than to him. This was theater, not justice, a performance to reinforce colonial authority over Earth visitors. Previous cases of this nature have resulted in fines of 20,000 credits, the prosecutor noted. But this case involved government officials, Judge Park replied. And the defendant has shown no remorse. 50,000 credits seems appropriate. The audience nodded in approval. Lee remained outwardly calm while inwardly documenting every procedural violation occurring before him. "Do you wish to make a statement before sentencing?" Judge Park asked, a formality she clearly expected him to decline. "I do, Your Honor," Lee said. "I respect colonial law and had no intention of violating it. I accept the court's ruling, though I find the penalty excessive compared to similar cases in your records." Judge Park's eyes narrowed. "You've reviewed our case records?" "Basic research before my visit, Your Honor." "Standard practice for trade representatives." A flicker of unease crossed Judge Park's face. For the first time, she seemed to consider that Lee might be more than he appeared. "The ruling stands," she said firmly. 50,000 credits or 3 months in rehabilitation. Which do you choose? I'll pay the fine, Lee said evenly. And I request formal documentation of these proceedings. The clerk looked surprised at this unusual request. Judge Park frowned. You'll receive standard documentation, she said dismissively. With all respect, Your Honor, Earth Trade Commission requires comprehensive records of all legal proceedings involving its representatives. Colonial Law Section 38A guarantees my right to these records. Something changed in Judge Park's eyes, a flash of uncertainty. Lee was too familiar with their laws for a simple trade representative. Provide Mr. Lee with his documentation, she ordered the clerk before standing abruptly. Court dismissed. As Lee was escorted out, he noticed Governor Kim watching from a private viewing booth above the courtroom. The governor's expression was troubled as his eyes followed Lee to the exit. Lee permitted himself a small smile as the guards led him to processing. The first phase of his investigation was complete, and it had revealed exactly what Earth Command suspected: justice on Nexus 7 wasn't blind, it was prejudiced and corrupt. And now he had the evidence to prove it. Governor Kim paced nervously in his office, the colony's 3 moons now high in the night sky. His usual confidence had vanished. The message from Earth Command still displayed on his screen, its official seal pulsing with importance. He had read it 5 times already, but the words remained shocking. This is a disaster, he muttered, running his hands through his thinning hair. The door chimed, and his assistant announced Judge Park's arrival. Kim quickly composed himself as she entered, her posture as rigid as always. You wanted to see me, Governor? Judge Park asked, a hint of annoyance in her voice. I have a full docket tomorrow. Governor Kim gestured to a chair. Sit down, Ji-yoon. We have a serious problem. Judge Park remained standing. I have judicial immunity, Governor. If this is about the Earth Trade Representative, my ruling was completely within. He's not a trade representative, Kim interrupted, pushing the display toward her. Read it. Judge Park's eyes narrowed as she scanned the message. Her face, normally composed, slowly drained of color. She gripped the edge of the desk. This can't be real, she whispered. Oh, it's real, Kim confirmed. I verified it personally. The man you find today is Federal Prosecutor Lee, Special Investigator General for the United Earth Alliance. He has diplomatic immunity and the authority to audit our entire judicial system. Judge Park sank into the chair. Why would they send someone of his rank undercover? Because they suspect corruption in our courts. Specifically, discrimination against Earthborn citizens. Kim's voice turned hard. And you just provided evidence by fining him 50,000 credits for a minor violation. I followed standard procedure, Judge Park insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Standard procedure? Kim laughed bitterly. I checked the records after receiving this message. The average fine for that offense is 8,000 credits. You charged him more than 6 times that amount. Outside the window, lights flickered across the colony's central district as the night cycle began. Neither of them noticed. What does he want? Judge Park asked finally. That's the worst part. He hasn't revealed himself yet. Kim pulled up another screen showing security footage. He paid the fine, collected his documentation, and checked into a hotel. He's waiting. Waiting for what? For us to make more mistakes, Kim said grimly. Earth Command's message was clear: we are not to approach him or interfere with his investigation. They know he's been detained and fined. It was part of his cover. Judge Park stood suddenly. I need to explain my ruling to him. If I show good faith. No. Kim's voice was sharp. The message specifically states any attempt to contact him directly will be considered obstruction of justice. He operates with full federal authority now. Then what do we do? Nothing. We wait. And we pray the corruption he's investigating doesn't lead to either of us. Kim leaned forward. Have you been taking payments from the Arcturus shipping companies? Judge Park's silence was answer enough. I thought so, Kim said quietly. How many others in your court? 4 judges. Maybe 6 administrators. Judge Park's usual confidence had crumbled completely. It seemed harmless. The Arcturus routes bring goods the Earth Alliance won't provide. A sharp beep interrupted them. Kim's assistant appeared on the communication screen. Governor, there's been unusual activity at the Colonial Administrative Center. Multiple individuals with Earth Alliance credentials have arrived and are setting up equipment in the East Wing. Kim and Park exchanged alarmed looks. He's already started, Kim whispered. The screen changed to show security footage of the East Wing. Lee stood in the center of a team of serious-looking officials, his posture completely different from the humble trade representative of earlier that day. He wore the formal black uniform of a federal prosecutor now, golden insignia gleaming on his collar. He moved with authority, pointing to different areas where his team began setting up equipment. He brought a full investigative team, Kim said in disbelief. They must have been waiting in orbit. Can we block their access to the judicial databases? Park asked desperately. With what authority? He outranks both of us now. Kim's shoulders slumped. We're watching the end of our careers, Ji-yoon. On the screen, Lee looked directly at the security camera. He knew they were watching. With deliberate calmness, he took out his official identification, the real one this time, and held it toward the camera. Then he smiled slightly, turned away, and continued directing his team. He planned this all along, Park whispered. He wanted me to fine him unfairly. And you played right into his hands, Kim said. We all did. As they watched in stunned silence, Lee's team began connecting to the colony's central database. Years of carefully hidden corruption were about to be exposed, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. 3 days after his courtroom appearance, Lee sat at the center of a web of information in the East Wing of the Colonial Administrative Center. Giant screens surrounded him, displaying thousands of case files, financial records, and communication logs. His team of 12 Earth Alliance investigators worked quietly around him, their faces lit by the glow of their stations. Sir, I found something interesting, said Officer Sung, approaching with a data tablet. She was the youngest member of his team but had already proven herself the most thorough. Judge Park has dismissed charges against these 3 shipping companies 16 times in the past year. Lee took the tablet, studying the cases. Each dismissal cites insufficient evidence despite cargo scans clearly showing prohibited Arcturus goods. Exactly, Sung replied. And look at the sentencing patterns for similar cases with different companies. Lee swiped through the files. The contrast was striking. Other companies faced heavy fines or even property seizure for identical violations. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidence. Good work, Lee said. Now check Judge Park's financial records for the same period. While Sung returned to her station, Lee walked to the window overlooking the colony's central plaza. From this height, Nexus 7 looked peaceful, its white buildings gleaming in the planet's reddish sunlight. Citizens moved about their daily business, unaware that their justice system was being dismantled from within. Sir, called Officer Min from across the room. You should see this. Lee joined Min at his station, where a complex web of financial transactions filled the screen. Judge Park maintains an offshore account on Proxima Station, Min explained. Every month, exactly 3 days after dismissing charges against the shipping companies, she receives a payment of 20,000 credits from the Shell Corporation. Lee studied the corporation details. Can you trace its ownership? Min nodded. Already did. It's registered to Governor Kim's brother-in-law. Lee wasn't surprised. In his experience, corruption rarely stopped at one official. Expand the search to all judges and administrative staff. Look for similar patterns. As his team dug deeper, the true extent of Nexus 7's corruption became clear. 7 judges and 12 administrators had accepted bribes. The colony's entire judicial system was compromised, systematically discriminating against Earthborn citizens while protecting those who paid for privilege. The evidence was damning, but Lee needed more. It wasn't enough to remove a few corrupt officials, the system itself required rebuilding. A soft chime indicated someone at the entrance. Lee glanced at the security feed to see Judge Park herself standing outside, her usual confident posture now uncertain. "Should I let her in, sir?" asked the security officer. Lee considered this unexpected development. "No. Tell her all communications must go through official channels now." Through the camera, he watched Judge Park receive this message. Her face tightened with frustration before she turned and walked away. "She's scared," observed Sung, who had paused her work to watch. "As she should be," Lee replied. "Continue your investigation." By evening, the pieces had come together. The corruption extended beyond simple bribery. Lee's team discovered altered evidence in dozens of cases, manipulated testimony, and a pattern of excessive sentencing for Earthborn defendants, particularly those with darker skin. "Sir," called Officer Min, "I've found something in Judge Park's private communications." Lee joined him at the terminal. The message displayed was from Governor Kim, dated just 2 hours before Lee's arrest. "Keep an eye out for Earth visitors near the courthouse," it read. "Intelligence suggests they're sending investigators. Anyone suspicious should be detained and discouraged from staying." Lee smiled grimly. "So my detention wasn't random. They were actively looking for investigators." "They targeted you specifically," Min agreed. "Because of your appearance. Their prejudice made them predictable," Lee said. "And that makes our job easier." As night fell over the colony, Lee's team compiled their findings into a formal report. The evidence was overwhelming: systematic corruption, discrimination, and abuse of power at every level of Nexus 7's justice system. Lee signed the final document and transmitted it to Earth Command with his recommendations. The response came within minutes. Full approval for the most extensive judicial reform any colony had ever seen. "Officer Sung," Lee called. "Prepare arrest warrants for Judge Park, Governor Kim, and the others implicated in our investigation." "We move at dawn." "Yes, sir," she replied. "And the colony-wide broadcast?" "Scheduled for noon tomorrow," Lee confirmed. "The citizens deserve to know what's been happening in their courts." Lee looked again at the peaceful colony outside his window. By tomorrow, everything would change. Justice would finally reach Nexus 7, and the system that had discriminated against people like him would be dismantled forever. For now, though, he allowed himself a moment of personal satisfaction. Judge Park had chosen the wrong Earth person to mistreat. At precisely noon, every screen on Nexus 7 switched to the same broadcast. Shopping centers, personal devices, transport terminals all displayed the Earth Alliance symbol before transitioning to Lee's face. He stood in front of the Colonial Administrative Center, wearing his full federal prosecutor uniform with its gold insignia gleaming in the sunlight. "Citizens of Nexus 7, Lee began, his voice calm but firm. "I am Federal Prosecutor Lee, Special Investigator General for the United Earth Alliance. 1 week ago, I arrived on your colony undercover to investigate allegations of corruption within your judicial system." In a holding cell beneath the courthouse, Judge Park watched the broadcast on a small screen. Her usually perfect hair hung limp around her pale face. Beside her, Governor Kim sat with his head in his hands. 7 other judges and administrators occupied cells nearby, all arrested before dawn. "My investigation has uncovered disturbing evidence," Lee continued. "For the past 3 years, your courts have systematically discriminated against Earthborn citizens. Fines for identical offenses have been 6 times higher for those with darker skin. Sentencing has been consistently more severe. Evidence has been altered or suppressed." Across the colony, people stopped to watch. In homes, in workplaces, in public squares, crowds gathered around screens, their expressions shifting from shock to anger as Lee presented specific examples. "But the corruption extends beyond discrimination," Lee said, his voice growing stronger. "Judge Park and Governor Kim have accepted over 2 million credits in bribes from illegal Arcturus trading companies. They have dismissed charges, altered evidence, and compromised the very foundation of justice on this colony." In a marketplace across from the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Many were Earthborn citizens who had suffered under the biased system. Their murmurs grew louder as Lee detailed the extent of the corruption. As of this morning, the implicated officials have been removed from their positions and placed in custody, Lee announced. But addressing individual corruption is not enough. The system itself must change. Lee gestured, and the camera pulled back to reveal a diverse group of officials standing behind him, half from Earth, half from the colony. I present to you the new Nexus 7 Judicial Reform Committee, Lee said. Earth Alliance has appointed Administrator Kong as interim colonial governor. She will work with this committee to rebuild your justice system on foundations of fairness and equality. Administrator Kong stepped forward, a respected colony-born judge known for her integrity. Her presence sent a clear message: this was not an Earth takeover, but a partnership. The reform process begins immediately, Kong announced. All cases from the past 3 years will be reviewed. Those unjustly fined or imprisoned will receive compensation. Those who suffered discrimination will see justice. In her cell, Judge Park turned away from the screen. He planned this from the beginning, she whispered. He let me mistreat him so he could expose everything. Governor Kim didn't answer. He was busy writing on a sheet of paper names of others involved, hoping to reduce his own sentence. Outside the Colonial Administrative Center, citizens had gathered. As Lee and Administrator Kong emerged from the building, a spontaneous cheer erupted. For many, especially the Earthborn residents, this was the first time they felt the system might work for them. Lee walked through the crowd, stopping to speak with those who reached out to him. He listened to their stories of unfair treatment, nodding with understanding. He had experienced it himself, if only briefly, the dismissal, the contempt, the excessive punishment based on his appearance. Later that evening, Lee visited the detention center. He walked past cells holding the former officials until he reached Judge Park's. Have you come to gloat? She asked without looking up. No, Lee replied simply. I came to inform you that you'll be transferred to Earth for trial next week. You'll receive better treatment there than you gave to Earth citizens here. Judge Park finally raised her eyes. You set a trap for me. You set a trap for yourself, Lee corrected. I simply gave you the opportunity to reveal who you truly are. Lee turned to leave but paused at the cell door. The irony is, if you had treated me fairly, if you had given me the same fine you would give any other visitor, I might never have discovered the full extent of your corruption. 1 month later, Lee stood at the spaceport, preparing to return to Earth. The changes on Nexus 7 were already visible. New judges presided in the courts, rulings were publicly accessible, and fines were standardized regardless of the offender's origin. Administrator Kong approached to say goodbye. You've changed everything, she said. Some still resent Earth's intervention, but most see the difference already. Lee smiled. Justice isn't an Earth concept or a colony concept. It's a human right. As his ship lifted off, Lee watched Nexus 7 grow smaller below him. He had arrived as a prosecutor seeking evidence. He departed having delivered something more valuable: equal justice for all.